Hey, what's up, everybody? Craig Smoak here with a 365 Sports Newsletter Baylor Edition. Hope you're having a great week. Hope you're doing a bit better than I am because, well, you may hear me cough. You will definitely hear me sniffle, and you might hear a little bit of congestion because I have been sick as a dog for the past week. Not that you care, but just warning you now that I won't be as much of a smooth operator as I typically am on these podcasts. But nevertheless, I am here. Hopefully, you're managing better than I have and avoiding the flu or whatever this gunk is. And hopefully you're in better spirits than a lot of college football fans coming out of this past weekend. As Baylor fans, I think it feels like for the first time in a long time, spirits are up actually. And that instead of it being other college football fans having the most fun and enjoying the season as it plays out, they're all very upset for various reasons. And Baylor fans with no dog in the fight right now, other than off the field, there's actually some interesting things to talk about, and in some cases, some fun things to talk about. So let's talk about what's been going on here over just the last couple of days, even as far as some newsy news. Well, the biggest news, obviously, is that Baylor has hired their new athletic director in Doug McNamee, a former member of the athletic staff back when Bryles and then eventually Matt Rule was around. Went over to Magnolia, worked for Chip and Joanna, and then eventually went and bought Field and Stream magazine, where he's been as of late. A very successful guy, a very well-known guy around Waco, a guy who knows Baylor, checks some boxes in this new era of college athletics, also doesn't check a lot of others. No athletic director experience. Not somebody who's been in the game here in the last few years, as all the NIL and rules changes have been ongoing, and somebody who walks into a situation where Baylor isn't sitting pretty much equally at the table thanks to the way the system was. They are very much constantly kind of chasing their own tail and definitely chasing the haves more than ever before. And he walks into a situation with a lot of upset fans because of the way things have gone over the last few years under the Dave Aranda coaching leadership in football. And you look around the rest of the sports, and there's been some good, there's been some angsty moments, but really the sour grapes revolves mostly around football. But it's a fan base that just in general doesn't feel like athletics is operating probably on a level that it should be. There's all of these things going on that he's walking into, and some of them, like fundraising, which will be imperative, he seems pretty well equipped for. Others, like handling coaching change, I don't know. And I won't sit here and pretend because it's the new hire that he'll be great at it. And I won't sit here and pretend because I know the guy, because I barely know him. I know people who know him very well. But friend of a friend, I won't spin that positive for that reason. I'll just call it what it is. And I'll borrow a line from CBS Sports' Tom Fornelli that he often uses during the head coaching changes of, seems like a great hire. I don't know if it'll work out. Like, that's my default on this. Seems like it's a good hire. Seems like it's an interesting hire. I'm not sure if it'll work out. I have a lot of questions, but I do know, at least for one day, for a couple of days, it has provided some level of excitement about the change that may be on the horizon, the change that can come now that Baylor has filled this very important leadership spot in the wake of Mack Rhoades and his exit this past month. So that was obviously a big to-do and very messy, and could have been messier. It was just a cleanup on aisle 9. It could have been a cleanup on like 9, 10, and 11, but they handled it pretty well and got to the process of going to fill his shoes. And the process has taken a couple of weeks, give or take, maybe a little bit longer. But here they've arrived at the process where the new athletic director is now in place. And that's a very key, important step to getting onto a path of hopefully returning to some success and returning to good vibes and returning to fun and returning to happy feelings around Baylor athletics and the sports programs. And there's been mixtures of that. There's been ebbs and flows of that, but there's been no constant stream, no pun intended, of that for quite a while. And hopefully Doug McNamee is the guy to fix that. But will he be that for certain? No, I cannot say that for certain. He could just as equally be a disaster as he could be a great success, because this is a very unpredictable world we're currently in with college football. And there are outsider CEOs like a Brett Yormark that's rolled into becoming a conference commissioner that have done some good things. They've also done some things you're kind of like, I don't know about that one. I don't think Doug McNamee will be like advertising playing basketball games in Mexico necessarily. But I do think he'll be able to fundraise and do those things well. Will he hire the best football coach possible? I think he'll think he will, but will he actually hire the best coach? I don't know that. There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of reason to be a little bit uneasy about the lack of experience as an athletic director. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about the success as a fundraiser, as a relationships person, as a person who knows Baylor, knows a lot of the big wigs, knows a lot of the big donors. So I think there's some rocks you can put in both piles, and I do think the positive pile, at least for right now, is a bit larger than the potential downside pile. But it will be fascinating to see over the coming weeks, months, and yes, even years of how this hire works out. It will be something that is a big part of Linda Livingstone's legacy, most certainly. And it will be a big part of where Baylor Athletics just finds itself in about 5 years, and especially about 10 years in the landscape of college sports. Are they more back to where we saw them in the early 2020s when they were starting to turn that corner into 21, had the greatest athletics year that they had maybe ever? And that was cool for a minute. And then these last 4 years or so, it's been very miss and very rarely a hit. Or will they be continuing to miss and maybe finding themselves continuing to fall? I mean, that's legitimately what you have to look at, and that's what he's here to fix. But the big question now is, will he, and how will he go about doing so? And I think that's the part that is going to be fun to see, is because there's some obvious things that you can do like right away that are obvious to us. Like I could say, sell beer, fix the tailgate scene, do this and do that. But actually doing those things, well, we got to kind of go to the Southern Baptist Convention and get some things clear. Like, I don't know how the beer sales process would work out, but it's not as easy as just, well, Mac Rhodes didn't want to do it, or so-and-so didn't want to do it. There's a bigger line of, I think, a chain of command or a chain of say that prevents that from just being an easy on and off switch that you can flip. But maybe Doug McNamee is the guy that can help flip that switch. I'm not so certain, but beer sales, obviously, you could make a wave immediately and make some easy money and spice up the in-game and spice up the game day atmospheres. You can knock out a lot of birds with one stone cold brew. But you could also, go backwards in time and not completely copy and paste, but reimagine a new version of the style and the swagger and the color palette and the old gold and those things from yesteryear when it comes to the Baylor football uniforms, when you were known for being cool. Seems like that was a long time ago, because it was, but you were actually known for being cool. You were known for looking cool, playing cool, acting like a team that belonged, playing like a team that belonged. And I think there were times where you were a little bit too out there and probably cocky, and it eventually was used against you to some degree. But there is room to win and have fun. And there's been a little bit of winning and a little bit of fun, but it's never ridden alongside one another like it did years and years ago. And so I think simple tweaks, like even just bringing back like a feeling of having some pride and having cool uniforms, is a step forward, rather than feeling like they're cool for a game, or we're allowed to have our chrome gold this weekend, guys. I remember when just posting the jersey on a Friday was like the biggest social media post of the week for the athletic department. And we are far removed from that, and uniforms aren't as big of a deal. But I think like that's another thing that's obviously a slam dunk. Fixing the tailgate scene, that seems like that's one of those that's an automatic and an inevitable. I'm not the expert on that, but I do know I've heard the complaints now for years, and I do think that's going to be an area that they attack, and that Doug's been responsible for in the past and was probably hurt by his departure as well. I think that's an area where, unlike uniforms or beer sales, that you could see an immediate effort and immediate change for the better there. But there's going to be a lot of things that I'm sure he's got on his list, and not all of them are realistic, like beer sales, or maybe they are. We'll see. But I think he'll have a lot of fun coming up with ideas, because there is a lot of room to be creative, and there is a lot of room for change. And I think Baylor is due for some good change, and I think they were due for a change at AD. I'm still of the belief that they're probably due for a change at head football coach here pretty soon, but we know that situation and we're not going to rehash it. I'll just say a new athletic director means that the clock is officially ticking, and it is win now and win and put together a winning team, Dave Aranda. Like, that is your job, and let's just focus on this next few months and this next season. But like, it is what it is. When a new athletic director comes in, no matter when and where, changes typically follow when it comes to staff and personnel if you don't hold up your end of the bargain. And a very unique situation led us to this situation, but the pressure is on and the clock is ticking. So how can they ramp up things around the program in the meantime? I think I just rattled off 2 or 3 things there that are obvious, but I'm sure there's a lot of others that they'll be writing down on their legal pads and getting to work on. But congrats to Doug McNamee. I know a lot of people are very excited for him. A lot of people that really like him, and I'm hoping that he can help revive and re-energize Baylor Athletics as the new AD replacing Mac Rhodes. But yeah, he's got his work cut out for him, and he's got a lot to get to work on, and not the things that I mentioned. Actually, the big work to start off with will be reconnecting with donors, getting to know some that maybe he didn't know as well, and ensuring the security and the wallet of the athletic department and of the investment into the football program and the basketball program. Scott Drew probably happier than anyone with this hire. Basketball will be in very good hands. Football is obviously the big question mark. I don't think Dave Aranda will be lacking in anything at his disposal, but I also do think that as far as the donation side goes, Doug McNamee is going to have the hardest time convincing people who do want to spend money. They just don't want to spend money on this current iteration of the program. That will be one of the big battles that he'll have this offseason of, please help us get these great players in the transfer portal. Well, we don't want to help you get those great players because we don't want this head coach to be around any longer. That's the debacle they find themselves in, thanks to the events of the last month. And so Doug will have to navigate that, but that's what he signed up for. So I'm excited to see how he tackles these challenges, excited to see the things that I haven't mentioned that change one way or the other, and excited to see what this all starts to look like and form into under his vision in the coming weeks and months. But congrats again to Doug McNamee. Now, a couple of other things. Matt Pallage out as defensive coordinator. That is official. Our own David Smoak over at 365 Sports was hot on this, and Pallage has been around the program for a good while now, a couple times over, actually. And he is now heading off to go be a coach somewhere else, as the report initially was, and I want to make sure that it was finally official. But yes, official, it looks like as of today. Smokey did have this last night, however, that North Texas is going to hire Baylor defensive coordinator Matt Pallage under their new Mean Green head coach and Neil Brown. And so Pallage, who was on trip number 2 to Waco with that Oregon season sandwiched in between there, he's now going to be heading to Denton for the new regime takeover there as they replace Neil Brown, former West Virginia coach, now former Texas assistant as well. They now go and replace the great staff and the great personnel, I bet, as well, there at North Texas after the hell of a season that the Mean Green have had under now Oklahoma State head coach Eric Morris. So that's a notable hire for Neil Brown. Good luck to Matt Pallage. I don't think that I ever heard a bad word about the guy as far as relationships and coaching and any of that stuff. I never heard him getting caught up in all the messiness from a few weeks ago, and the Mac Rhodes fight on the sidelines with Michael Trigg and other assistants getting involved. Never heard really much of anything but good. Now, definitely when it came to the on the field, heard plenty of complaining and hand wringing and this and that. And eventually Aranda basically had to take over play calling duties again. Not basically, did. But I do think this is probably best for Pallage. Baylor's going to have to go in yet another direction defensively. Clearly, they're not going to be able to just stay pat with what they did this past year. So I think you're going to have a bit of a shakeup on that side. And this is a nice clean slate and a fresh opportunity for him up at North Texas. I think this is a win-win. I think this might have been an inevitable move by Baylor anyways. Not sure, but just it could have been. And you're going to have to shake up that side, like I said. So you move on. He gets a new start and gets a nice ground zero beginning with Neil Brown's vision of the Mean Green. So congrats to Matt Powledge. Good luck to him. And thanks for being a good dude from all indications. And then there was also one other big piece of news, and that was obviously on Sunday, as you had some teams say, we don't want to play in bowl games. Notre Dame being one of the most high-profile teams saying that after getting screwed out of the CFP. They decide they're not going to play. Some other teams decide they're not going to play, and it eventually ends in this situation where you've got 5 and 7 teams that are now waiting in line to get the call to, guess what, restart your season, even though you've thought now for the past week or two that your season is over. And eventually enough no's were dished out that Baylor was in line. And Baylor actually had an opportunity to play in a bowl game. And Baylor became one of about 7 to 8 teams that ultimately said no. The Bears turning down an offer to play Georgia Southern and go play in the Birmingham Bowl. There were multiple other Big 12 teams, and those were some of the reasons why they did end up in line to play a bowl game. But they decide to be one of those teams that says, no, we want to focus on our offseason. We want to focus on 2026. And I can see where there's some hand wringing, and there's some people that don't like that. And there's some people that feel like that's against the spirit of the game, and it very much is. But knowing that roster and what they're trying to do with it right now, knowing the changeover at AD, knowing the changeover that we're already seeing now at Powledge on the coaching staff and what else might be coming, I do get it. I don't love it, but I don't disagree with it either, because I don't think that you want some guys hanging around that maybe you're ready to move on from, just being around and practicing for the sake of this bowl game. And because, well, that's tradition and that's what you do. And look, it's also sportsmanship and it's competition. And so I understand that element as well. Like, what happened to just playing because it's your brothers and this and that? Totally get that argument. But I think for Baylor, but not necessarily for Kansas State, but they lost their head coach, and Iowa State lost their head coach. I do think for certain schools, it does make sense to break from tradition and break from what many people look like as this golden opportunity. So they turned down the Birmingham Bowl invite, and then 2 or 3 others after them also turned down the Birmingham Bowl invite. Now, eventually it turns into a great rivalry matchup with App State saying, we'll take on Georgia Southern because we hate those guys and we'll love to play them in a bowl game. And that worked out well for everybody. But Baylor not choosing to play in a bowl game did see a bit of a wave of backlash to that. Now, sure, you want to see your favorite team play as often as you can, especially the diehards. It doesn't matter how good or bad they are. I'm not sure how exciting a Birmingham Bowl versus Georgia Southern would have been. Quite frankly, not sure how many hits the previews would have gotten for that one, or how many clicks the breakdowns would have gotten for that one. Not that that's the driving factor, but I do think if it was the Holiday Bowl versus somebody that was a name value, then I think you're probably taking them up on that offer. But the Holiday Bowl is not that low on the line where they're just having 5 and 7 teams saying no. So in this case, it's a lower bowl game. No disrespect to the Birmingham Bowl. That's actually the most passionate market for college football in the entire country, year after year after year. I'm sure it would be great. But given that you have the changeover on staff and the changeover you're anticipating and preparing for and going through the process of already making over currently, I don't blame them for not electing to go to a bowl game. But I do understand those who do not agree with that decision. So safe to say it's been a bit of a newsy week, and safe to say that Baylor is now going to be looking to replace Matthew Powledge. They are officially deep into the offseason. We're going to see the first acts of new AD Doug McNamee here over the coming days. Did watch his press conference and didn't have a lot of takeaways from it, although one was he had a lot of enthusiasm, and 2, I like that he created a social media account. I think that was something that with this football coach, with the athletic director, I don't want to see my football coach basically be Lane Kiffin all the time and just be on there trolling like he's 14. I also don't want my AD to be out there just talking about how cool he is all the time. But there was no presence from Baylor leadership, like zero presence from those guys over the last few years, with the exception of like when somebody notable died, Aranda would tweet about it, which was like 2 times a year. and Mac Rhodes, I think, had an account but never tweeted from it. I don't think it hurts to have some presence. And Doug McNamee, I think, not only being open to ideas and being excited about the job and having a bit of a feel for it, but also like getting active on social media, at least starting an account, putting a little video out to introduce himself. I think that's just a brilliant first step. It's a very small step, but it's one that I go, ooh, I like that. I really wasn't thinking about that, but that's a nice little sign and a little crumb of maybe more of what's to come as far as just being more interactive and being more involved rather than kind of at times like it felt towards the end sort of chiming in occasionally from your ivory tower, so to speak. But there's a lot going on. Despite the lack of a bowl game coming up, there will be more changes to staff. There will be tons of changes to the roster. And there will be a lot to talk about over the course of this offseason. But I think a job well done on the hire of an athletic director and the introduction of that now as well. And now the real work will start for Doug McNamee. And for football, we know the stakes and we know what they need to get to work on. So let's see how that all unfolds here over the coming weeks. Appreciate you watching. Subscribe to 365 Sports Newsletter. If you just come across this video and you're wondering how, 365sports.video, 365sports.video is where you can find me writing and talking about Baylor once a week, as well as a cast around me and just others from the universe sprinkled throughout, talking about each of the 16 schools each and every week on Wednesday. 365sports.video to sign up for the 365 Sports Big 12 newsletter. And I will expand a bit more on my thoughts, like on Matt Powledge or no bowl game or the hiring of McNamee, etc. in my article. They'll kind of play alongside each other for the most part, but I can sometimes get a little bit more in-depth there. So if you haven't checked that out, that's where you can go do it. 365sports.video. Until next time, stay healthy, avoid whatever the hell it is that I've got this week, and enjoy Christmas season and enjoy the football that we have remaining, even though we all hate the sport that we love right now. It seems like coming out of this weekend, enjoy it in a bit of fresh air and a bit of a new change of clothes, some new bed sheets for the Baylor Bears that feel nice and hopefully will only get more comfy as this holiday season continues on and these changes take effect. But I think there's some exciting things in store. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like, okay, there's some leadership in place. Let's go. Let's see where it takes us. Until then, until next time, I'm Craig Smoak. This has been the 365 Sports Newsletter, Baylor Edition.